In Bitcoin terms, there is only one God, Bitcoin. There is only one token, Bitcoin. Why Cardano? Well, they're UTXO or extended UTXO. So the development model is basically the same. What's nice about it is you don't steal a single user from Ethereum or Solana. In fact, you gain users from them. Why? Because they want to get access to the Bitcoin DeFi liquidity. So you just have to build bridges on both sides. This year, some of the first generation stuff will come, and the really sexy, awesome stuff will probably come late this year to next year.
When is Bitcoin DeFi coming to Cardano? And can you explain it in simple terms, how that is even possible?
Yeah. Well, here's what I learned from my time at the Bitcoin Foundation, the Bitcoin Education Project, and being around when Bitcoin was less than $1. In Bitcoin terms, there is only one God, Bitcoin. There is only one token, Bitcoin. And so if you try any deviation of that script, you're dead. So Bitcoin DeFi, you have a wallet, you have a toggle or a button or something called DeFi mode. You click it and you've turned your Bitcoin on to do DeFi stuff. You do DeFi stuff. You get a yield, you do lending, you buy some stuff with it, whatever. You pay your fees and you get paid in Bitcoin. And then when you're done, you click the button, Bitcoin DeFi turns off. Now, under the hood, what's happening? You have two networks connected or more to each other, in this case, Bitcoin and Cardano. There's a trustless bridge that relies on the security long-term of Bitcoin itself. You go from Bitcoin to another network. It's wrapped in that network, and that network has intents. So in this case, it's Babel fees on Cardano. So when you pay your Bitcoin fees, you're paying wrapped Bitcoin, and under the hood, it's being exchanged for ADA or whatever that thing is, but that's been done by a third party. You don't see any of that. It's like going to Barbados, you buy some coffee, use your credit card, you're paying in dollars. They're being paid in a different currency. You don't think about that different currency because automagically something's happening inside the system. And when you disable DeFi mode, you're consolidating all your wrapped Bitcoin, moving it back to Bitcoin. As long as the governing function has a good UX, you pay your fees in Bitcoin, and the security ultimately relies on Bitcoin long-term, it's good. Any deviation from that blueprint, you're going to fail inside that model because Bitcoiners have already been exceedingly clear. There is only one way to secure their assets. It's proof of work, and there's only one currency that matters. It's Bitcoin. Now, they're also clear that they like money. And so do you want your Bitcoin to have no yield or a 10% yield? I'd probably think a 10% yield, right? So if there's DeFi products that offer those capabilities, why should Bitcoin be excluded just because it can't talk to those types of systems? So that's really the magic of Bitcoin DeFi is to enable a button at the wallet level that gives you that user experience reality and make it seamless and fluid. Now, under the hood, enormous amount of stuff has to be done. First, they need a development model for this. And so BitVMX does that with RISC-V, and it takes RISC-V assembly and transpiles to Bitcoin script to run Taproot. And what we're doing is we're adding a UPLC converter so you can compile UPLC to BitVMX so that in languages that support UPLC like Aiken and Plutus, which are the development languages of Cardano, they can compile then, and you can use Aiken then to write Bitcoin applications and Cardano applications. So one language run everywhere. It's like Node.js to Node, for example, JavaScript to Node.js, for example. So there's that. And then there are a lot of recursive stuff, the snark stuff and zero knowledge stuff for the trustless bridging mechanism for it. And then usually what you want to do is layer it with some other things for a better user experience in the short term. So you have eventual reliance on the Bitcoin security model, but short-term reliance on a different model. The reason you do that is user experience, because you don't want to pay high fees and you don't want to wait an hour for a transaction to basically clear. So the consumer can make that decision. And if it's a large amount of Bitcoin, you take that decision away from them because it's too much value at risk. If it's a small amount, then you just default to a different bridge mechanism. But that said, it's not very complicated. It's infrastructure. We know how to build this type of infrastructure. There's a lot of people like Sergio Lerner who invented Rootstock, and he was the guy who figured out how many Bitcoin Satoshi had. He's been in the space since like 2011. They know how to do this stuff, And Taproot was a gift from God. It's a glass of ice water in hell, Mast and Snorsigs and these other things. They give you enough to actually run zero knowledge proofs on Bitcoin. I bet at a very high cost and very slow. Like takes an hour to fully settle and, many hundreds to thousands of dollars per transaction. But you only need to do that maybe on a daily basis for a batch of many, many, many things, as opposed to every individual event. And then once you've opened this up, It's the single largest TVL event in the history of the industry. You know, they barely kind of sort of just slightly opened it. TVL is already $5.8 billion. Bitcoin sitting multi-trillion dollars, and it's mostly institutional and nation state led at this moment. So you mean to tell me that BlackRock doesn't want to make 10% on their Bitcoin or 5% on their Bitcoin? Even if they don't want to, what if Grayscale does? What's the more attractive investment product for your ETF? So there's going to be a network effect that drives people into it. And then you'll wake up and there'll be $200-300 billion in TVL. Why Cardano? Well, they're UTXO or extended UTXO. So the development model is basically the same, and the logic of how to build apps, the logic of how to build these bridging mechanisms is the same. And we have a much superior way of doing zero knowledge cryptography inside these bridges. And also just we're philosophically compatible. We're deflationary, they're deflationary. Ouroboros is like the proof of stake version of proof of work. The way Ouroboros was designed, we actually formalized the security of Bitcoin first and then figured out how to build a POS that was the same. And it was called the GKL model. We published it in 2015. It's actually our most cited paper. I think there's over 1,000 citations on it. So philosophically, everything is very similar in Cardano to Bitcoin. And development-wise, things are very similar. When you go to Bitcoin or Solana, there's a security gap there. And almost certainly you have to introduce a lot of trusted third parties to make the user experience work very well. So, and also if there's one universal language for UTXO DeFi, it means as a developer, you have a turnkey experience to deploy onto Dogecoin and Litecoin and to Bitcoin and to Cardano at the same time. So it's kind of the nexus of all those things when you really think about it. So what's nice about it is you don't steal a single user from Ethereum or Solana. In fact, you gain users from them. Why? Because they want to get access to the Bitcoin DeFi liquidity. So you just have to build bridges on both sides. And so the easiest way for Solana to talk to Bitcoin is through Cardano. And the easiest way for Ethereum to talk to Bitcoin will be through Cardano as well. A direct integration's hell for these types of things. And we have a way to bridge that. We even have a way of combining the Lightning Network and our layer 2 network called Hydra. We call it Lightning Hydra. I love that name because I can create a cool logo and it'll be really fun. But, it just makes Lightning better. So real excited. Yeah, a lot of it's wallet level magic. A lot of it's cryptography, and a lot of it just relies on Taproot at the end of the day. And BitVMX did most of the heavy lifting. You got to kudos to the Fairgate guys. If you go to fairgate.io, you can kind of read about it. And what we're doing is just figuring out how to fix all the broken windows and cross the T's and dot the I's to get this turned on. So it's a gradual thing, and it's a DApp by DApp level thing. So basically, as you create the network-to-network communication, then you have a collection of dApps that support wrapped Bitcoin on Cardano for DeFi mode. And at that point, they get utilized. But that's pretty simple and straightforward. So we're creating a network of partners like Fluid Tokens and many, many others in the Cardano ecosystem. Basically, take that on, and it's just easy to use. And then when you're done, you just click the button. Pretty simple, right? Click a button on, click a button off. Pay transaction fee in Bitcoin, pay transaction fee in Bitcoin. It's like it feels like we're doing the right thing, if that's my user experience.
What is the timeline for that? Is it happening this year, next year, in 3 to 5 years?
No, this year. This year, some of the first generation stuff will come, and the really sexy, awesome stuff will probably come late this year to next year. But it's not a long horizon thing because at the end of the day, a lot of the core infrastructure is out of R&D. If we had to wait on Taproot, that would be problematic. But Taproot came out in 2021, and there's already a pretty good Bitcoin DeFi ecosystem. Like Stacks is there, and Babylon is there, and these other things are there. So there's a lot of neighbors. So you always ask, like, what's your neighbors to learn about your neighborhood? And our neighbors are pretty good, with that. So a lot of it's just, can we get the wallet support and the other things? Because I own my own wallet, I have Lace Wallet. I can kind of guarantee it because I can just go to Brandon and say, like, you will do this. And he's like, yes, sir. And he goes into the basement and he's like, oh God, how do I figure this out? And we did a few things to accelerate it. For example, a lot of the Bitcoin DeFi stuff was invented in Argentina. So we went to Argentina and opened an office in Argentina. So I actually rented some real estate. We hired 7 Argentinian developers. We brought them in, and they're now coordinating, cooperating to build a cell phone app for our wallet, but then also to work with Sergio's team at Fairgate to kind of accelerate that. We also started looking at the cryptography of these two sides, and we're trying to clean up some things to make it a little bit more secure and more heavily rely upon the Bitcoin security model.